So my game plan when I graduated 27 years ago was to wait tables and write poetry.
Okay.
And so I did that for a summer, and my ankles and knees and back never stopped hurting.
Yeah.
3 months later, I still felt like, I don't know, physically just overcome. And
Uh-huh.
also at the end of a 10-hour shift, there was no reading, there was no writing. I decided, Mickey, you got to pivot to a safe office job. We didn't call it pivoting then. We called
Mhm.
it figuring something else out. And so I got hired at a telecom research startup as employee number 3. And they said, hey, you have writing on your resume, figure out press releases and send them out to the media. There's the fax machine. I we did have a Rolodex of some people to fax, and so I didn't have to do all of that. But I knew that we published data and we had great data. So I was like, oh, here's the tables of inbound and outbound traffic from the US to Caribbean islands for last year. And I sent out a release and nothing happened. And I just started looking at what journalists were reporting on, and I just said they like stories. They like stories with numbers, but they want the numbers to tell a story, and our numbers were just numbers. And so I looked at one of the countries there, and I asked the other guy who was a research analyst, "Why does this country have so much more inbound and outbound traffic to and from the United States than all these other Caribbean countries?" And he's, "Oh, that's a big call center for 1-900 numbers, which were popular at the time. 75 cents a minute, you get your horoscope.
Mhm.
Does your pet need a psychic? So you can talk to someone for $1 a minute and they'll tell you how to better raise your dog, or all kinds of things. You name a subject matter, they were there. Love life, whatever. I talked about that and that story. I sent it out, and boom, we got that first press release. The Economist, Financial Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and 3 telecom trade publications wrote an article. And I was like, whoa, okay,
Mm.
that's good. And so I would continue to look at our data and try to find stories behind it. And one of the things I noticed going back a few years was, hey, when there was growth in a country that I guess wasn't like an industrialized country that we recognize, like 3-4 years in a row, all of a sudden the economies would start booming, usually year 2, 3, or 4. And so I shared some data, and boom, we got picked up in Investors Business Daily and a few other places. Even more importantly, we started getting orders that weren't from telecom companies. All of our customers were mostly telecom companies or telecom analysts. And all of a sudden, we're getting orders from hedge funds, investment firms, and places like
Mm.
that. And they're like, hey, this gives valuable data. And so I just continue to tell these stories, and we just continue to grow in business and in reputation. And I just was like, this is the coolest thing. And then journalists started calling me and saying, hey, in the future, could you email me instead of faxing? And that's when the light bulb went off and said, email is really a lot easier. You just hit send. You don't program 100 numbers in a machine that only holds 100 numbers and then have to delete it the next day to put 25 more numbers in there. It was really refreshing. I had mentioned to my boss that, hey, you could create a business where you just email journalists. And they're like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. And so I spent that following year in my downtime just contacting journalists. And at the time, these were people on message boards, just hanging out. There wasn't really social media at the time. And everyone I approached, except for like maybe 2 people, were like, yes, that sounds refreshing. Send me press releases on my subject. And originally I was going to be just technology. And what I found is as I was contacting people, they're like, oh yeah, I'm no longer technology, I'm now sports. Or I'm no longer technology, I'm now doing food and beverages. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect people's beats to change so much. So I just like, okay, I'm gonna start putting everybody in there. And so when I launched in October of 1998, I was just a matchmaker, and I did it. It worked because these people were like appreciative, and they weren't being overwhelmed with email yet. But we would wait and see what happens over the next few years. It was really great to see so many journalists respond. And then over time, I got more of these I don't know if it's the poetic mind or a different section of my mind where I would help clients who are just feeling like nothing's working and think outside the box with creative ways to try things. And also seeing a lot of releases that work, getting me thinking, could this work for other people? And I found that it does. Like the survey or study, that was something I didn't know would work for anybody until we tried it, and it did. I don't know. I think that I'm an accidental business owner. I did have to step up my business skills. I joined a marketing mastermind, and for a little over 10 years, I was part of that. And I felt like I got my MBA.
Yeah.
I started to learn what statistical relevance was because I was just cutting ads on and off in Google and saying, that didn't work. That didn't work. Oh, 3 clicks and nobody bought. That ad doesn't work. And so I started to learn things and A/B split testing and all of that good stuff. I don't know. I feel like I was completely at peace with being a poet and being a server. But I tell you, a server's life is not easy. And I am a very generous tipper because I still remember standing on concrete and what a full shift like that is like. It's tough. It really
Yeah.
is.